In the vast expanse of the Galactic Confederation, where 1,000 civilized species coexist under the watchful eyes of the Academic Council, there exists an unspoken truth that chills even the most hardened space veterans to their cores. Earth, that small blue marble spinning in the outer rim of an unremarkable galaxy, is not just another world. It is a planetary nightmare wrapped in deceptive beauty, a place where evolution went mad and created monsters that somehow learned to smile. The beings that crawl from this hellscape call themselves humans, and against all logic and natural law, they insist on calling their torture chamber of a planet home. They speak fondly of creatures that could tear apart a Zilithian battlecruiser with their bare claws, treat atmospheric electrical storms as entertainment, and somehow manage to domesticate predators that other species use in their most terrifying horror stories. But perhaps most disturbing of all, they bring these nightmares with them when they venture into civilized space. They call them pets. What happens when the galaxy's most prestigious academy decides it's made a terrible mistake? What occurs when the powers that be realize they've let a monster into their halls of learning? And most importantly, what kind of hell breaks loose when that monster's harmless little pet decides that no one, absolutely no one, gets to hurt its human? Some mistakes echo through the cosmos. Some errors in judgment reshape the very fabric of interstellar relations. And sometimes, just sometimes, dismissing the quiet student from the Deathworld proves to be the last decision a space station ever makes. This is the story of humanity's introduction to galactic society. This is the tale of why, in the aftermath, the mere mention of Earth sends seasoned diplomats reaching for the strongest alcohol their species can process. This is why human became synonymous with approach with extreme caution in over 400 languages. And it all started with what the Academy Council thought was a simple dismissal of an unwanted student. The morning light of Kepler Station's artificial sun cast long shadows across the Academy's pristine corridors as Maya Chen made her way to advanced theoretical physics. Her footsteps echoed softly against the polished metal floors, a sound that had become as familiar to her as breathing over the past 2 standard cycles at the Galactic Confederation's most prestigious institution of learning. Maya had always been quiet by human standards, though she'd learned that by galactic standards she was practically invisible. At barely 5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she moved through the halls like a ghost among the towering Zilithians, the crystalline Vorthan students, and the gas-form Nebulans who attended classes in specialized containment suits. Her simple gray academy uniform was always pristine, her assignments always submitted on time, and her grades consistently placed her in the top 5% of her class. Yet somehow, Maya Chen had become a problem. It wasn't her fault, really. Earth's admission to the Galactic Confederation had been a rushed affair, pushed through by a handful of progressive counselors who believed that diversity strengthened the alliance. The paperwork had been filed, the treaties signed, and the first exchange students selected before anyone had bothered to conduct a proper psychological evaluation of humanity as a species. Maya had been one of 12 humans chosen for the program, selected for her exceptional aptitude in theoretical physics and xenobiology. She'd arrived at Kepler Station with dreams of bridging the gap between human and galactic science, of proving that her species could contribute meaningfully to the greater cosmic community. Those dreams had been steadily eroding for months now. She slipped into her usual seat in the back corner of Professor Kethvar's classroom, nodding politely to the few students who acknowledged her presence. Most didn't. The Zilithians found her uncomfortably small and quiet. The Vorthans couldn't understand why she didn't communicate through crystalline resonance like a proper being. The Nebulans simply couldn't comprehend how anything with such a dense, solid form could possibly contain intelligence. Professor Kethvar, a distinguished Zilithian whose blue-scaled hide spoke of centuries of academic achievement, began the day's lecture on quantum entanglement dynamics. Maya took careful notes, cross-referencing the material with human theoretical models she'd studied back on Earth. The parallels were fascinating, though she'd learned long ago not to volunteer such observations. Her attempts to contribute to class discussions had been met with everything from polite dismissal to outright hostility. The fundamental principle, Professor Kethvar was saying, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd helped write the textbooks, is that consciousness itself plays a role in quantum collapse. This is why species with properly evolved mental architectures can influence quantum states through focused thought alone. The statement was problematic on several levels, not least because it assumed that consciousness was somehow standardized across species. Human studies had shown that quantum mechanics operated independently of observation, with apparent consciousness effects being the result of measurement rather than awareness itself. But she said nothing. She'd made that mistake before. 3 seats ahead of her, Zarthek, a Zilithian whose family held significant political influence in the Confederation, raised one clawed hand. "Professor, is it true that some primitive species lack the mental complexity to properly interact with quantum fields? I've heard that the newest additions to our academy may not possess the cognitive architecture necessary for advanced physics." Several students turned to glance at Maya, their expressions ranging from curious to dismissive. She kept her eyes on her notes, her face carefully neutral. This wasn't the first time such comments had been made, and it wouldn't be the last. Professor Kethvar's eyes also found Maya, and she saw something that made her stomach tighten. Disappointment? Embarrassment? All species admitted to the Confederation have demonstrated sufficient intelligence for academic pursuits, he said diplomatically. Though it's true that some may struggle with concepts that come naturally to more evolutionarily advanced civilizations. Maya's fingers tightened slightly around her stylus, but she maintained her composure. She'd grown used to such casual dismissals of human intelligence. What bothered her more was the growing sense that her presence here was becoming increasingly unwelcome. After class, she made her way to the Academy's biolab for her advanced xenobiology practical. The lab was a marvel of technology, capable of simulating environments from dozens of different worlds for the study of various life forms. Today's assignment involved analyzing the behavioral patterns of Rigelian nerve swimmers, microscopic organisms that could process information at quantum speeds. Maya worked methodically, setting up her equipment and preparing her samples. She'd always excelled at laboratory work, finding comfort in the precise, measurable nature of scientific investigation. Unlike social interactions, experiments had clear parameters and predictable outcomes. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice the approach of her lab partner until a shadow fell across her microscope. Looking up, she found herself facing Veltar, a Vorthan whose crystalline form pulsed with barely contained annoyance. "I need to speak with you," Veltar said, her harmonic voice carrying an edge that made several nearby students look up from their own work. Maya straightened, setting down her specimen container carefully. "Of course. What can I help you with?" "This partnership isn't working," Veltar said bluntly. "Your methodologies are primitive. Your understanding of quantum biology is rudimentary at best. I've been carrying this team for weeks, and I'm tired of watching my grades suffer because of your limitations." The lab had grown quiet around them. Maya could feel the eyes of other students and even Professor Yildana, the ancient Nebulan who oversaw the practical sessions. Heat crept up her neck, but she kept her voice level. "I believe my contributions have been adequate," Maya said carefully. "My analysis of the Andromedan spore samples last week identified 3 behavioral patterns that your initial scan missed. Or perhaps your primitive pattern recognition is occasionally useful for spotting obvious details that more sophisticated minds overlook as irrelevant." Professor Yildana drifted closer in her containment suit, the gas-form being's voice emanating from speakers with an electronic crackle. "Is there a problem here, students?" "No problem," Veltar said quickly. "I was simply explaining to my partner that I'll be requesting a transfer to work with Kethara for the remainder of the semester. I believe it would be mutually beneficial." Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. Kethara was one of the top students in their year, a Zilithian whose family connections ensured she had access to the best opportunities the Academy offered. Being chosen as her partner would virtually guarantee Veltar's advancement to the more prestigious research tracks. "I see," Professor Yildana said, her electronic voice giving nothing away. And you, Miss Chen? How do you feel about this proposed change? Maya looked around the lab, noting the expressions of her classmates. Some looked sympathetic, others merely curious, but none showed any sign of wanting to partner with the human student. She was being abandoned, and they all knew it. I think, Maya said carefully, that everyone should have the opportunity to work with partners who best complement their research style. It wasn't an acceptance, but it wasn't a fight either. Professor Yildana seemed to understand the subtext. Very well, I'll make the necessary arrangements. Miss Chen, you may work independently for the remainder of the semester. The dismissal was polite, but final. Maya nodded and returned to her work, though she could feel the weight of curious stares for several minutes afterward. Working alone wasn't necessarily a disadvantage in academic terms, but the social implications were clear. She was being systematically isolated. The pattern continued through her remaining classes. In advanced stellar engineering, her suggestions for improving fusion containment efficiency were met with polite skepticism. In interspecies communication theory, her insights into human linguistic patterns were dismissed as irrelevant to proper interstellar diplomacy. Even in courses where her performance was exemplary, she found herself increasingly treated as an outsider looking in on conversations meant for real students. By the end of the academic day, Maya felt drained in a way that had nothing to do with intellectual effort. She made her way back to her quarters in the student residential sector, a small but comfortable room that had been designed to accommodate human physiological needs. The artificial gravity was set to Earth normal, the atmospheric composition properly balanced, and the temperature maintained at a comfortable range for her species. It was also increasingly feeling like a prison. Maya settled at her desk to review the day's notes, but found herself staring out the viewport instead. Kepler Station orbited a gas giant whose swirling storms painted constantly changing patterns across its surface. The sight was beautiful in an alien way, reminding her that she was literally worlds away from everything familiar. Her meditation was interrupted by a soft chiming from her personal communicator. She activated the device, and a three-dimensional projection of her academic advisor materialized above the desk. Counselor Nethrim was an elderly Vorthan whose crystalline form had taken on the deep amber hue that came with centuries of accumulated knowledge. "Miss Chen," he said, his harmonic voice carrying none of the warmth she'd grown accustomed to in their previous meetings. "I hope you're well. I was hoping we could schedule a meeting to discuss your academic progress." Maya felt her stomach tighten. Academic reviews weren't scheduled randomly, and the formal tone of Nethrim's communication suggested this wasn't a routine check-in. "Of course, Counselor," she replied. "When would be convenient for you? Tomorrow morning, first period, my office. I believe we have several important matters to discuss regarding your future here at the Academy." The projection winked out before Maya could respond, leaving her staring at empty space. The formal language, the scheduling during class time, the complete absence of his usual encouraging remarks about her progress all pointed to one conclusion. They were going to ask her to leave. Maya leaned back in her chair, trying to process the implications. She'd known this was coming, had seen the signs building for weeks, but the reality of it still hit her like a physical blow. All her dreams of bridging the gap between human and galactic science, of proving that her species could contribute meaningfully to the cosmic community, were about to come crashing down. She thought about her parents back on Earth, how proud they'd been when she was selected for the exchange program. She thought about Dr. Sarah Kim, her mentor at Cambridge, who'd spent months preparing her for this opportunity. She thought about the 12 billion humans who were counting on students like her to establish positive relationships with their new galactic neighbors, and she thought about the growing certainty that she was about to fail them all. Maya stood and walked to the small storage compartment where she kept her few personal possessions. Most were standard items, clothes, toiletries, a few books she'd brought from Earth for comfort reading. But tucked into the back corner was a small travel carrier that had been her most controversial decision upon arriving at the Academy. She'd declared it when she arrived, of course. The customs forms had been filled out properly, all the necessary permits obtained, health certificates validated. She'd even endured a 3-hour lecture from station security about proper containment protocols and species interaction guidelines. But despite the bureaucratic approval, her choice to bring a companion from Earth had raised eyebrows throughout the Academy administration. Maya opened the carrier and smiled for the first time all day. A small, furry head poked out, followed by whiskers twitching with curiosity and bright black eyes that seemed to take in everything around them with intelligent interest. "Hello, Max," she said softly, reaching in to gently stroke the soft fur behind his ears. "How was your day?" Max the ferret stretched and made a small chittering sound that Maya had learned to interpret as contentment. He was small even by ferret standards, barely 18 inches long including his tail, with the classic sable coloring that made him look like a tiny shadow when he moved. To Maya, he was a piece of home, a reminder of the small apartment she'd shared with him near the Cambridge campus where she'd completed her undergraduate studies. To everyone else at the academy, Max was a barely controlled predator from a Deathworld. Maya had tried to explain that ferrets were domesticated animals, companions that humans had bred for thousands of years to be gentle and playful. She'd shown them videos of ferret behavior, presented documentation of their use as therapy animals, even offered to demonstrate Max's training and temperament. None of it mattered. The moment the other students learned that Max was capable of hunting and killing other animals, that his species had evolved as predators, that he possessed sharp teeth and claws even in his domesticated state, they'd classified him as a dangerous creature from a hostile world. The fact that he was smaller than most academy students' arm didn't seem to factor into their assessment. "They want us to leave, Max," Maya said, continuing to pet the small animal as he climbed onto her shoulder. It was a position he'd learned to love, giving him a perfect vantage point to observe the world around him while remaining close to his human. "I think tomorrow's meeting is going to be about transferring me to a less prestigious institution, or maybe sending me back to Earth entirely." Max chittered softly and nuzzled against her neck. If he understood the implications of her words, he didn't seem particularly concerned. For him, as long as Maya was present, the location was irrelevant. Maya wished she could share his simple perspective, but the weight of expectation and responsibility sat heavily on her shoulders. She wasn't just a student here, she was a representative of her entire species. Her failure would reflect on all of humanity, potentially affecting Earth's standing in the Galactic Confederation for generations to come. She spent the rest of the evening preparing for the worst-case scenario. She updated her personal files, organized her research notes, and composed preliminary drafts of several difficult messages she might need to send back to Earth. Through it all, Max remained a small, warm presence, occasionally investigating an interesting scent or sound, but always returning to her side. As she prepared for sleep, Maya found herself wondering what would happen to the other human students in the exchange program. Would her dismissal affect their standings as well? Would it confirm the growing suspicion among Academy faculty that humans simply weren't ready for advanced galactic education? She settled into bed with Max curled up beside her, a warm ball of fur that purred softly in a way that always reminded her of home. Outside her viewport, the gas giant continued its eternal dance of storms and light, beautiful and alien and utterly indifferent to the small dramas playing out on the space station that orbited it. Tomorrow would bring answers, but Maya suspected she already knew what those answers would be. Her time at the academy was ending, not because of any failure on her part, but because she'd committed the crime of being different in a place that valued conformity above all else. As she drifted off to sleep, Maya's last conscious thought was a small prayer that whatever happened tomorrow, it would be quick and as painless as possible. She had no way of knowing that her quiet little pet was about to ensure that nothing about the coming confrontation would be either quick or painless. In the morning, the galaxy would learn why humanity's companions were as dangerous as humanity itself, and why dismissing a student from the Deathworld was about to become the Academy's greatest mistake. Maya woke to the gentle hum of the station's life support systems cycling through their morning routine. The artificial sunrise was beginning outside her viewport, casting the same warm light that had greeted her every day for the past 2 standard cycles. Today, however, the familiar sight felt more like a farewell than a beginning. Max was already awake, sitting on her desk and watching something only he could see through the transparent aluminum window. His tail twitched with interest as he tracked the movement of a maintenance drone performing routine hull inspections. Maya smiled despite her anxiety. At least one of them would miss this place when they were inevitably sent home. She went through her morning routine with mechanical precision. Shower, dress, quick breakfast from her personal supply of human-compatible food. Max received his own breakfast, a carefully formulated mixture that met ferret nutritional requirements while remaining acceptable to the Academy's exotic pet regulations. He ate with the focused intensity that characterized all his activities, then immediately set about his morning exploration of the small living space. Maya watched him investigate a corner where the wall met the floor, his sensitive nose picking up scents that her human senses couldn't detect. Everything was a potential adventure to Max. Every day brought new mysteries to solve and territories to map. She envied his simple approach to life, his ability to find contentment in whatever circumstances presented themselves. A chime from her communicator reminded her that she had exactly 30 minutes before her meeting with Counselor Nethrim. Maya gathered her personal datapad and headed for the door, then hesitated. Academy regulations required that all pets remain in their designated quarters during the academic day, but something made her uncomfortable about leaving Max alone. It was probably just pre-meeting anxiety, but she couldn't shake the feeling that today was different somehow. "Come on, Max," she said, opening his travel carrier. "You're coming with me today." Max looked at the carrier with the mild skepticism he reserved for unnecessary confinement, but obediently climbed inside. Maya sealed the carrier and attached it to her shoulder, using the specialized harness she'd designed for hands-free transport. The system allowed Max to see out through transparent panels while remaining securely contained, satisfying both Academy safety requirements and ferret curiosity needs. The corridors of Kepler Station were busier than usual as students made their way to first-period classes. Maya received the customary mixture of curious stares and polite avoidance that had become her norm, though she noticed several students pointing at Max's carrier and whispering among themselves. Word had clearly spread about the human who brought a predator to class. Counselor Nethrim's office was located in the administrative sector, a maze of chambers designed to accommodate the varied physiological needs of different species. The Vorthan's workspace was a marvel of crystalline architecture, with resonating formations that served multiple functions from furniture to communication arrays. The effect was beautiful but alien, reminding Maya once again how far she was from anything resembling home. Nethrim was waiting for her, his crystalline form positioned behind a desk that seemed to grow directly from the floor. The amber hue of his body had deepened since their last meeting, indicating either advanced age or significant stress. Maya suspected it was the latter. "Miss Chen," he said, his harmonic voice carrying none of its usual warmth. "We have much to discuss." Maya settled into the chair designed for humanoid species, placing Max's carrier on the floor beside her where he could observe the meeting through the transparent panels. She noticed that Nethrim's attention lingered on the carrier for several seconds before returning to her face. "I've been reviewing your academic performance," the counselor continued, activating a holographic display that showed her grades and evaluations. "Your numerical scores are exemplary. Top 5% in theoretical physics, highest marks in xenobiology, exceptional performance in mathematical modeling." Maya felt a brief flicker of hope. Perhaps this meeting wasn't what she'd expected after all. However, Nethrim continued, and the hope evaporated. There are other factors that must be considered in evaluating a student's suitability for continued enrollment at this institution. The holographic display changed, showing what appeared to be incident reports and faculty evaluations. Maya recognized several of them. The complaint from Veltar about her primitive methodologies, Professor Kethvar's notes about her difficulty with advanced concepts, even a formal report from the Student Services Department about social integration challenges. The Academy is more than just a center of learning. His crystalline form pulsing with what Maya had learned to recognize as discomfort. It's a microcosm of galactic society, a place where future leaders and scientists learn to work together across species boundaries. A student's ability to integrate successfully into our community is every bit as important as their academic achievements. Maya kept her expression neutral, though internally she was fighting a rising tide of anger and disappointment. I understand, Counselor. May I ask what specific integration challenges have been identified? Nethrim's form flickered, a sign of Vorthan anxiety that Maya had learned to read during her studies of interspecies communication. It's not any single incident, Miss Chen. Rather, it's a pattern of cultural incompatibility. Your human approaches to problem-solving, while occasionally innovative, often clash with established methodologies that have served the galactic community for millennia. Your tendency toward independence and skepticism of authority structures creates friction in collaborative environments. You mean I ask too many questions and don't automatically defer to older species, Maya translated. The counselor's form pulsed more rapidly. That's not entirely inaccurate. The Academy operates on principles of respect for established knowledge and hierarchical learning structures. Students are expected to master existing paradigms before attempting to challenge them. And how long is that supposed to take? Maya asked. How many centuries of mastering established paradigms before a species is allowed to contribute original thought? Nethrim's harmonic voice took on an edge. This is precisely what I'm referring to, Miss Chen. This confrontational approach, this assumption that your perspective has equal validity to that of civilizations with millions of years of scientific advancement. Maya felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. This wasn't about her academic performance or her ability to contribute to galactic science. This was about her refusal to accept that humanity was inherently inferior to older species, her insistence on treating galactic knowledge as a starting point rather than an endpoint. I see, she said quietly. So what happens now? Nethrim seemed relieved that she wasn't going to fight the inevitable. The Academy has arranged for your transfer to the Centauri Institute on Alpha Proxima. It's an excellent institution, very well suited to students who need more structured guidance. You would complete your degree there and return to Earth with full academic credentials. Maya recognized the name. The Centauri Institute was essentially a remedial school for species that couldn't hack it at the major galactic universities. It was where they sent students who were too primitive for real academic discourse but too politically important to simply reject outright. A diplomatic solution that would let everyone save face while keeping humanity safely quarantined from serious scientific discussion. And if I refused the transfer? Maya asked. Then I'm afraid your enrollment at this academy would be terminated, Nethrim replied. You would be free to return to Earth, but you would not receive academic credit for your time here. Maya looked down at Max's carrier. The small ferret was watching the conversation intently, his dark eyes moving between the two speakers as if he understood every word. In many ways, she realized, Max's situation paralleled her own. Both of them were being judged not for what they actually were, but for what others assumed they must be based on their origins. I need some time to consider my options, Maya said finally. Nethrim's relief was evident in the shifting patterns of light within his crystalline form. Of course, take all the time you need. The transfer could be arranged for the beginning of next semester, giving you several weeks to make arrangements. Maya stood, picking up Max's carrier with movements that were perhaps a bit more abrupt than necessary. Thank you for your time, Counselor. I'll let you know my decision soon. She made it halfway to the door before Nethrim's voice stopped her. Miss Chen, for what it's worth, I want you to know that this decision wasn't made lightly. Your academic potential is undeniable, and in a different environment, I believe you could achieve great things.
Maya turned back to face him, and for a moment the careful diplomatic mask slipped from her features.
In a different environment where I wasn't expected to pretend that millions of years of galactic civilization had somehow reached the peak of all possible knowledge, where I could suggest improvements without being told that my species is too primitive to understand the underlying principles, your species is young, Nethrim said softly. In time, perhaps humans will develop the wisdom to complement their intelligence. And in the meantime, we should just sit quietly and accept whatever scraps of knowledge older species decide to share with us. The crystalline being's form pulsed with what Maya had learned was the Vorthan equivalent of a sigh. Humility is a virtue, Miss Chen. Perhaps that's something the Centauri Institute could help you develop. Maya felt anger flash through her, hot and bright and completely inappropriate for a diplomatic meeting with her academic advisor. She forced herself to nod politely and left the office before she could say something that would eliminate even the option of transfer to a lesser institution. The walk back to the student quarters gave her time to cool down and think more clearly about her situation. She could accept the transfer to Centauri Institute, complete her degree in an environment designed for a lesser species, and return to Earth with credentials that would be respected by human institutions but quietly dismissed by anyone who understood galactic academic hierarchies. It would be a compromise, but it would also be a form of surrender. Alternatively, she could refuse the transfer and return to Earth immediately. Her academic career effectively ended before it really began. She would have to face her parents, her mentors, and eventually the broader human population with the news that their first attempt at galactic higher education had failed spectacularly. Both options felt like defeat. Maya was so lost in thought that she almost missed the commotion coming from the direction of the student commons area. Raised voices, the sound of furniture being overturned, and what sounded like someone in considerable distress echoed through the corridors ahead of her. As she rounded the corner, Maya saw a crowd of students gathered in a rough circle around something happening near the central seating area. Most were maintaining a safe distance, but she could see several Academy security officers pushing through the crowd toward whatever was causing the disturbance. "It's completely out of control," someone was shouting. "Someone needs to stun it before it kills someone." Maya felt a chill of premonition. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the complaints of students who were trying to maintain their viewing positions. Max's carrier bumped against her hip as she moved, and she could feel the small ferret becoming agitated by the noise and crowd pressure. When she finally reached the inner edge of the circle, Maya's worst fears were confirmed. In the center of the commons area, a Zalithian student Maya recognized as Kethara was backed against an overturned table, her blue-scaled hide pale with fear. Standing between her and a trio of advancing security officers was something that made Maya's heart stop. It was another ferret, larger than Max and clearly terrified. Its fur was standing on end, making it appear almost twice its actual size, and it was making the aggressive, chittering sounds that domestic ferrets use to warn off threats. As Maya watched in horror, one of the security officers drew what looked like a neural disruptor and aimed it at the small, frightened animal. "Wait!" Maya shouted, pushing past the last line of students. "Don't shoot! It's just scared." The security officer, a Vorthan whose crystalline form was pulsing with combat readiness, turned toward her. "Stand back, citizen. We have a dangerous predator situation." "It's not dangerous," Maya said, moving slowly toward the confrontation. "It's a domesticated animal. It's probably just lost and confused." "Lost?" Kethara's voice was shrill with panic. "That thing attacked me. It came out of nowhere and started making threatening sounds and baring its fangs." Maya looked more closely at the ferret and felt her understanding of the situation shift. The animal was wearing a collar with what looked like Academy identification tags, but it was definitely not behaving like a properly socialized pet. Its posture was defensive rather than aggressive, but it was clearly terrified and not responding to human vocal commands. "Whose pet is this?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "It belongs to that other human," one of the security officers said. "The one in advanced quantum mechanics, Jenkins, I think." Tom Jenkins was one of the other human exchange students, a quiet physics major from Oxford who'd been having his own struggles with social integration. Maya had spoken with him a few times during orientation, but they drifted apart as each became absorbed in their respective academic challenges. "Where is Tom now?" Maya asked. "Apparently he's been in the medical bay for the past 3 days, Kethara said, her voice still shaky. "Some kind of allergic reaction to Rigelian spore exposure. The point is, his vicious pet has been running loose in the station for who knows how long." Maya felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together. Tom's ferret had been alone for 3 days, probably scared and hungry and increasingly desperate. It had somehow escaped from Tom's quarters and was now loose in the station trying to find its missing human while avoiding the terrifying alien creatures that surrounded it. "It's not vicious," Maya said firmly. "It's scared and looking for its owner." If you let me handle this, I can get it safely contained without anyone getting hurt. The lead security officer's crystalline form pulsed with skepticism. You're qualified to handle dangerous predators? I'm qualified to handle ferrets, Maya said, setting Max's carrier down and opening it carefully. And so is this one. Max emerged from the carrier with his characteristic curiosity, immediately taking in the scene around him. His nose twitched as he caught the scent of the other ferret, and he made a soft chittering sound that was completely different from the aggressive warnings coming from Tom's pet. The effect was immediate. The larger ferret stopped its defensive chittering and looked directly at Max, its posture shifting from terrified aggression to confused recognition. Here was another member of its species, calm and unafraid, in this place full of alien monsters. Maya knelt slowly, keeping her movements calm and deliberate. "Come on, sweetie," she said softly, extending her hand toward Tom's ferret. "You're okay now. Let's get you somewhere safe." The ferret took a hesitant step forward, then another. Max chittered encouragingly and moved to Maya's side, demonstrating that this human was safe and trustworthy. Within moments, the lost ferret was in Maya's arms, exhausted and grateful to finally find something familiar in this alien nightmare. The crowd of students had gone completely silent. Even the security officers seemed unsure how to react to the sight of Maya cradling the dangerous predator like a frightened kitten. "Incredible," breathed Professor Yildana, who had apparently arrived during the commotion. "I've never seen anything like that." "How did you know it would respond to your animal?" "Ferrets are social creatures," Maya explained, gently stroking the frightened animal to calm it further. "They communicate through scent and sound in ways that we're only beginning to understand. Max was able to tell this one that I was safe to approach. Christian, fascinating," the Nebulan professor said. "Perhaps you could write a paper on interspecies animal communication for the Xenobiology Journal." Maya looked up at the professor, then at the crowd of students who were staring at her with expressions ranging from amazement to newfound respect. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she was being seen not as a primitive student from a backward world, but as an expert with knowledge that others lacked. "I'd be happy to," Maya said, "though I should probably get this little one back to Tom first and make sure he's okay." As she stood with the rescued ferret in her arms and Max at her side, Maya felt something shift in the atmosphere around her. The other students were no longer looking at her with dismissive tolerance or polite avoidance. She had just solved a dangerous predator situation that had baffled Academy security using nothing more than knowledge that came from growing up on the so-called Deathworld. Maybe, she thought as she made her way toward the medical bay, her meeting with Counselor Nethram was going to go differently than expected after all. The galaxy, she was beginning to suspect, was about to learn that dismissing the humans had been a premature conclusion. The medical bay of Kepler Station was a testament to the galactic community's commitment to accommodating diverse species. Environmental controls could simulate the atmospheric conditions of hundreds of different worlds. Medical equipment adapted to treat everything from crystalline Vorthan shell fractures to Nebulan containment breaches. And specialized chambers maintain the precise conditions needed for dozens of exotic physiologies. Maya found Tom Jenkins in a standard humanoid treatment room, though he looked anything but standard at the moment. His usually pale complexion had taken on an unhealthy greenish tint, and angry red welts covered any exposed skin. He was conscious but clearly miserable, connected to an IV drip that Dr. Silthara had explained was slowly filtering Rigelian spores from his bloodstream. "Maya?" Tom's voice was hoarse and confused. "What are you doing here? And is that—" His eyes widened as he recognized the ferret in her arms. "Oh God, where did you find him?" "He was exploring the student commons," Maya said diplomatically, settling into the chair beside Tom's bed. "Got a little lost and scared some of the other students. Nothing serious." Tom struggled to sit up, and Maya could see tears forming in his eyes. "I'm so sorry. When the allergic reaction hit, everything happened so fast. Security sedated me and brought me here, and I didn't even think about Bandit until yesterday. When I asked about him, they said they'd handle the situation, but no one would tell me what that meant." Maya felt a chill. "What did you think it meant?" I was afraid they were going to euthanize him, Tom said, his voice breaking. Dangerous alien predator loose on the station, you know. I've been going crazy thinking about what might happen to him. Maya gently transferred Bandit to Tom's lap, where the ferret immediately began nuzzling against his owner with obvious relief. The reunion was touching, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Tom's fears about handling the situation might not have been unfounded. Tom, she said carefully, have you been having other problems here? Beyond the academic stuff, I mean? Tom's laugh was bitter. You could say that. My lab partners keep requesting transfers. Professors act like my questions are either stupid or somehow threatening. Yesterday, before I got sick, Professor Velthon told me that perhaps I should consider whether galactic-level science was appropriate for my developmental stage. Maya winced. She'd heard variations of that same dismissive attitude from multiple faculty members. Have you been thinking about leaving? Every day, Tom admitted. The only reason I'm still here is that I don't want to let down the program. If the first group of human students all wash out, what does that say about our species? It says that we were thrown into an environment designed to exclude us and somehow managed to survive anyway, Maya said firmly. Tom, they offered me a transfer today to Centauri Institute. Tom's expression went through several rapid changes before settling on resigned acceptance. The remedial school. Yeah, I figured that was coming for all of us eventually. Are you going to take it? I was, Maya said, until about an hour ago. She told him about the incident in the Commons, about how Max had helped calm Bandit, about the sudden shift in how the other students and even faculty were looking at her. Tom listened intently, occasionally stroking Bandit's fur as the ferret dozed contentedly in his lap. So they're finally starting to realize that we might actually know things they don't? Tom said when she finished. That growing up on a Deathworld might have given us some unique perspectives worth considering? Maybe, Maya said. Or maybe they're just fascinated by our primitive animal handling skills. Either way, it's the first time since I got here that anyone's looked at me like I might have something valuable to contribute. Tom was quiet for several minutes, thinking. Finally, he said, Maya, what if we're approaching this whole thing wrong? What do you mean? I mean, what if instead of trying to prove that we're as good as them at their science, we started showing them what our science can do that theirs can't? You're talking about human advantages, things that come naturally to us but are difficult or impossible for other species. Take pattern recognition, for instance. Human brains evolved to spot predators and prey in complex environments. We can see connections and relationships that their more sophisticated minds might miss because they're too focused on established categories, or adaptability, Maya added, her excitement building. We're generalists by necessity. Most galactic species evolved in stable environments where specialization was advantageous. We evolved in chaos where the ability to rapidly change approaches could mean the difference between survival and extinction. And emotional intelligence, Tom continued. They keep calling our social dynamics primitive, but we've had to develop incredibly sophisticated ways of reading body language, vocal cues, and group dynamics just to survive in multi-tribal societies. Maya felt a surge of something she hadn't experienced in months. Genuine enthusiasm for her academic prospects. Tom, what if we collaborated on something? A research project that showcased specifically human approaches to galactic problems. I'm listening. Maya pulled out her datapad and began pulling up files. I've been working on quantum entanglement dynamics in biological systems. The traditional galactic approach assumes that consciousness is a uniform phenomenon across species. But human neuroscience suggests that different types of awareness might interact with quantum fields in fundamentally different ways. That's brilliant, and I've been working on multidimensional mathematics that could support your theoretical framework. Standard galactic mathematics evolved from species with specific cognitive architectures, but human mathematical thinking developed along different pathways. We could write a joint paper, Maya said. Something that demonstrates not just human competence, but human innovation. Show them that our primitive perspectives might actually be advances rather than deficits. And we could use the ferret incident as a case study, Tom added. practical application of human understanding of animal psychology in a crisis situation. Demonstrate that our emotional approach to problem-solving can be more effective than their purely logical methodologies. Maya felt her pulse quickening. This was the first time since arriving at the academy that she'd felt like she was moving towards something rather than running away from failure. "Do you think we can make it work?" "I think," Tom said, "that we're about to remind the galaxy why humans have survived everything our Deathworld could throw at us." Despite the fact that Tom was supposed to be recovering from a serious allergic reaction. Maya took detailed notes while Tom contributed ideas and theoretical frameworks, his mind clearly working at full capacity despite his physical condition. The project they designed was ambitious almost to the point of audacity. They would challenge not just specific galactic scientific assumptions, but the underlying philosophical frameworks that supported those assumptions. They would demonstrate that human approaches to complex problems could yield insights that were literally impossible within traditional galactic thinking patterns. It was also, Maya realized, exactly the kind of confrontational approach that had gotten her in trouble with Counselor Nethrem in the first place. "Tom," she said, pausing in her note-taking, "you realize this is going to be seen as incredibly arrogant? We're essentially arguing that our species has developed scientific insights that civilizations millions of years older haven't considered." "Good," Tom said firmly. "Maybe it's time they stopped confusing age with wisdom." Maya looked down at Max, who had been quietly exploring the medical bay while she and Tom talked. The small ferret had managed to locate a maintenance access panel that had apparently been improperly sealed and was now chittering softly at something he'd discovered inside. "Max, what are you doing?" Maya asked, but before she could investigate further, an alarm began sounding throughout the medical bay. Dr. Silthera, a Zilithian physician whose blue scales carried the deep coloration of advanced medical training, rushed into Tom's room with obvious concern. "I'm going to need you to remain calm," she said, her voice carrying the kind of forced composure that suggested the exact opposite was appropriate. "We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Maya asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. "There's been a containment breach in the hazardous materials storage section," Dr. Silthar explained. "Someone apparently left a maintenance access unsealed, and atmospheric pressure changes have caused several containers of Andromedan nerve toxin to leak into the station's ventilation system. Andromedine nerve toxin was one of the most dangerous substances in known space, capable of causing permanent neurological damage or death to most species within minutes of exposure." "How long before it reaches this section?" Tom asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer wasn't. "According to our atmospheric monitoring systems, we have approximately 15 minutes before toxic levels reach the medical bay," Dr. Silthera said. "Emergency containment protocols are in effect, but evacuation may not be possible for patients in critical care." Maya looked at Tom, whose condition definitely qualified him as critical care, then down at Max, who was still chittering at the maintenance panel. Something about his behavior was bothering her, but she couldn't quite identify what. "Doctor," Maya said slowly, "how exactly do the monitoring systems track atmospheric contamination?" Silthara replied, "They detect specific molecular signatures and track their movement through the station's air circulation systems." Maya felt puzzle pieces beginning to click together. "And those sensors are calibrated for what kinds of detection?" "Molecular densities detectable by galactic standard sensory equipment," the doctor said, though she was beginning to sound confused by the line of questioning. Maya knelt beside Max's maintenance panel and gently moved him aside so she could see what had caught his attention. Inside the panel, she could see a complex array of sensors and monitoring equipment, all functioning normally according to their indicator lights, except for one thing that the galactic sensors couldn't detect, but Max's enhanced ferret senses could. "Silthara," Maya said, her voice taking on the calm precision she used when she was absolutely certain of her facts, "I think your monitoring systems may have made an error in their atmospheric analysis." "I'm sorry." Maya stood and looked directly at the Zilithian physician. "The containment breach you're detecting isn't Andromedan nerve toxin, it's residual atmospheric contamination from yesterday's Regellian spore exposure in the xenobiology lab." The molecular signatures are similar enough that your sensors are misreading the type of contamination, but different enough that the actual threat level is nowhere near what your systems are calculating.
Doctor!
Seothara's blue scales paled. How could you possibly know that? Maya gestured toward Max, who was now sitting calmly beside the maintenance panel. Because if there were actually Andromedan nerve toxins in the ventilation system, my ferret would be dead right now. His species is incredibly sensitive to atmospheric toxins, much more so than any galactic monitoring equipment. He's been breathing the supposedly contaminated air for the past 10 minutes without showing any signs of distress. You're using your pet as an atmospheric sensor, Doctor? Silthera's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and fascination. I'm using my understanding of comparative biology to make an accurate assessment of the actual threat level, Maya corrected. Humans have been using animals as environmental monitors for thousands of years. It's a practical application of the same principles that allowed me to handle the ferret situation in the Commons earlier. Tom was staring at Maya with something approaching awe. You just solved a station-wide emergency crisis using knowledge that came from growing up on Earth. Maya felt the same shift in perspective that had occurred earlier, but magnified tenfold. She wasn't just demonstrating human competence or even human innovation. She was showing that human approaches to problem-solving could literally save lives in ways that galactic technology couldn't match. Silthera was already activating her communicator, relaying Maya's analysis to Station Command. Within minutes, technicians had confirmed that the monitoring systems had indeed misidentified the atmospheric contamination, and the emergency protocols were being canceled. Miss Chen, Dr. Silthera said, her voice carrying a respect that Maya had never heard from Academy faculty before, would you be willing to consult on a review of our atmospheric monitoring protocols? It appears that our systems may have some significant blind spots that your expertise could help address. Maya looked at Tom, who was grinning despite his continued physical discomfort. I'd be honored to help, Doctor, though I think you might want to include my colleague here as well. We're working on some collaborative research that might be relevant to a broader review of human applications in galactic systems. As Dr. Silthara left to coordinate the post-crisis analysis, Maya sat back down beside Tom's bed. Max jumped onto her lap, apparently satisfied that the interesting smells in the maintenance panel had been properly investigated. So, Tom said, still planning to accept that transfer to Centauri Institute? Maya scratched behind Max's ears and smiled. I think I'm going to be too busy to transfer anywhere. We have a paper to write and apparently several consulting projects to complete. Think they'll still try to get rid of us? They can try, Maya said, her voice carrying a confidence she hadn't felt since arriving at the academy. But I think they're about to discover that dismissing the students from the Deathworld isn't as simple as they thought. Outside Tom's window, the gas giant continued its eternal storm dance. But for the first time since arriving at Kepler Station, Maya found its alien beauty comforting rather than alienating. The galaxy was vast and strange and full of wonders she was only beginning to understand. And now, finally, it was starting to understand her back. 3 weeks later, Maya stood before the Academy's most prestigious forum, the monthly research symposium where graduate students and faculty presented their most groundbreaking work to an audience of the galaxy's leading scientific minds. The auditorium was packed with representatives from dozens of species, their varied forms creating a tapestry of crystalline structures, gaseous manifestations, and exotic physiologies that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Today, however, Maya felt no intimidation at the sight of the assembled galactic intelligentsia. She was no longer the dismissed student from the Deathworld. She was Dr. Maya Chen's protégé, co-author of the paper that had sent shockwaves through the Academy's Theoretical Physics Department, consultant to the station's emergency response protocols, and most importantly, herself. Max sat in his travel carrier beside the presentation podium, his presence no longer a source of concern for station security, but rather a mark of Maya's unique expertise. The small ferret had become something of a celebrity among the Academy staff, though Maya suspected he remained blissfully unaware of his elevated status in galactic scientific circles. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's acoustic enhancement system. 3 weeks ago, many of you considered human students to be an interesting but ultimately limited addition to our academic community. Today, I'm going to explain why that assessment was not just wrong but dangerously incomplete. A ripple of surprised murmurs went through the audience. Maya had abandoned the careful diplomatic language that had characterized her previous interactions with Academy faculty. Today, she was speaking with the confidence of someone who had proven her worth through results rather than rhetoric. She activated the holographic display system, and the first slide appeared above the podium. Convergent Intelligence: Why Human Cognitive Architecture Offers Solutions to Galactic Scientific Challenges. For the past 2 standard cycles, Maya continued, human students at this academy have been evaluated based on our ability to master existing galactic knowledge frameworks. This approach assumed that scientific progress comes from perfecting established methodologies rather than questioning their underlying assumptions. Professor Kethvar, her former theoretical physics instructor, shifted uncomfortably in his front row seat. Maya caught his eye and smiled politely before continuing. Today, my colleague Tom Jenkins and I will present research that demonstrates a different approach, leveraging the unique cognitive advantages that humans developed on Earth to solve problems that have challenged galactic science for millennia. The second slide appeared. Case Study 1: Atmospheric Crisis Management Through Biological Monitoring. Maya spent several minutes detailing how her use of Max's enhanced sensory capabilities had corrected the medical bay's life-threatening misdiagnosis of atmospheric contamination. The audience listened with increasing attention as she explained the principles of biological environmental monitoring and its applications to space station safety protocols. The traditional galactic approach relied on sophisticated technological sensors, Maya explained. But these instruments, no matter how advanced, are limited by their programming and calibration parameters. Biological monitoring systems evolved through millions of years of natural selection pressure can detect environmental changes that artificial sensors miss entirely. Dr. Silther, who had become one of Maya's strongest supporters since the medical bay incident, stood from her seat. Ms. Chen, are you suggesting that Academy safety protocols should incorporate animal-based monitoring? I'm suggesting, Maya replied, that Academy safety protocols should incorporate the best available monitoring systems regardless of whether they're technological or biological in origin. In many cases, that means combining both approaches to create more robust detection capabilities. The third slide appeared. Case Study 2: Pattern Recognition in Quantum Entanglement Dynamics. Maya yielded the podium to Tom, who had been released from medical care but still showed traces of his Rigelian spore exposure. Human pattern recognition capabilities evolved in complex, chaotic environments where survival depended on identifying threats and opportunities from incomplete information. Tom began. This cognitive architecture allows us to see relationships that more specialized intelligence might overlook. He detailed their collaborative work on quantum entanglement in biological systems, explaining how human intuitive leaps had led to mathematical models that challenged fundamental galactic assumptions about consciousness and quantum field interactions. Professor Velthon, Tom said, addressing his former instructor directly, you told me that my questions about multidimensional quantum interactions were inappropriate for my developmental stage. Today I am presenting mathematical proof that those questions led to insights that your traditional approaches couldn't achieve. Professor Velthon, a distinguished Vorthan whose crystalline form was pulsing with barely contained agitation, rose to respond. The mathematical frameworks you're proposing are unconventional. How can we be certain that your human cognitive biases haven't led you to erroneous conclusions? An excellent question, Professor. Which brings us to our third case study, Practical Applications and Verification Protocols. The fourth slide appeared, Case Study 3, The Ferret Incident and Interspecies Communication Theory. Maya detailed the events in the student commons, but this time she analyzed them through the lens of comparative psychology and interspecies communication theory. Traditional galactic approaches to animal behavior are based on logical analysis of observable actions, Maya explained. But humans evolved alongside dozens of other social species, which forced us to develop intuitive understanding of nonverbal communication across species boundaries. She activated a video recording of the incident in the Commons, showing the moment when Max's presence had calmed the terrified ferret. The audience watched in fascination as Maya narrated the subtle communication cues that had enabled the peaceful resolution. The key insight, Maya said, is that emotional intelligence isn't a primitive characteristic that advanced civilizations should outgrow. It's a sophisticated cognitive tool that allows for rapid, accurate assessment of complex social situations. Counselor Nethram, Maya's academic advisor, stood from his position near the back of the auditorium. His crystalline form was showing the deep amber coloration that indicated significant stress. "Miss Chen," he said, his harmonic voice carrying across the auditorium, "these are certainly interesting observations. But are you seriously proposing that human students should be granted equal academic standing based on what amounts to animal training and pattern matching?" Maya felt a familiar flash of anger, but this time she channeled it into focused determination rather than defensive retreat. "Counselor Nethram, I am proposing that the Academy reconsider its definition of intelligence itself." The fifth slide appeared, redefining intelligence, from hierarchical specialization to collaborative diversity. Maya's voice took on the authoritative tone she'd learned from her mentor, Dr. Sarah Kim, back at Cambridge. For millions of years, galactic civilization has operated on the assumption that intelligence can be ranked hierarchically, with older species naturally superior to younger ones. This model has led to remarkable achievements in specialized fields, but it has also created blind spots that become increasingly dangerous as our challenges grow more complex. Look around this auditorium. Every species here represents a different evolutionary path, a different solution to the challenges of developing intelligence in a complex universe. The Vorthans achieved crystalline perfection and harmonic communication. The Zilithians developed scales of logic and hierarchical reasoning. The Nebulans transcended physical limitations entirely. Maya paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Humans developed something different, adaptive intelligence. We became generalists because specialists couldn't survive on Earth. We developed emotional and social intelligence because logical analysis alone wasn't enough to navigate chaotic multi-species environments. We learned to combine intuition with analysis, biology with technology, individual insight with collaborative problem-solving. Tom stepped forward to join her. "The question isn't whether human intelligence is superior to galactic intelligence. The question is whether galactic civilization can afford to ignore any form of intelligence that might help solve the challenges we're facing." The sixth slide appeared. Collaborative applications, current projects, and future possibilities. Maya and Tom spent the next 20 minutes detailing their ongoing research collaborations with Academy faculty, their consulting work on station safety protocols, and their proposed expansions of the human exchange program. "We're not asking for special treatment," Maya said as she reached the conclusion of their presentation. "We're offering partnership. Human students bring cognitive tools that complement rather than compete with existing galactic capabilities. Our pattern recognition enhances your analytical precision. Our adaptive thinking supplements your specialized expertise. Our emotional intelligence provides context for your logical frameworks." She looked directly at Counselor Nethram. 3 weeks ago, you offered me a transfer to Centauri Institute because you believed human students couldn't meet Academy standards. Today, Tom and I are presenting research that your most distinguished faculty members are calling revolutionary. The only thing that changed was your willingness to recognize human contributions as valuable rather than primitive. The auditorium had gone completely silent. Maya could see faculty members exchanging glances, some nodding thoughtfully while others appeared to be struggling with fundamental challenges to their worldview. Professor Kethvar stood slowly. "Miss Chen, Mr. Jenkins, your presentation is thought-provoking." But implementing the changes you're suggesting would require a complete restructuring of academy admissions and evaluation protocols. It would. You're asking us to abandon systems that have served galactic civilization for millennia. No, Tom interjected. We're asking you to build on those systems, to recognize that the galaxy is bigger and more complex than any single approach to intelligence can handle alone. Dr. Silthara rose from her seat. I'd like to speak in support of the human students' proposal. Their consultation on our atmospheric monitoring protocols has already prevented 2 potential disasters that our traditional systems would have missed entirely. Other faculty members began standing, some offering support, others raising questions, still others expressing skeptical concern about the implications of Maya and Tom's research. The auditorium filled with the kind of intense academic debate that Maya had dreamed of participating in since first arriving at the academy. As the discussion swirled around them, Maya looked down at Max's carrier. The small ferret was watching the proceedings with his characteristic alert curiosity, apparently fascinated by the variety of sounds and movements filling the auditorium. What do you think, Max? Think we're making progress? Max chittered softly and pressed his nose against the carrier's transparent panel, his attention focused on something happening near the back of the auditorium. Maya followed his gaze and saw a group of academy administrators huddled in what appeared to be an urgent discussion. Dean Korthak, the ancient Zilithian who oversaw all academy operations, was at the center of the group. His expression was unreadable, but Maya had learned enough about Zilithian body language to recognize signs of serious contemplation. After nearly an hour of debate, Dean Korthak raised one clawed hand for silence. The auditorium gradually quieted as hundreds of beings turned their attention toward the academy's highest authority. Miss Chen, Mr. Jenkins, the dean said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, your presentation today has raised questions that this institution will need considerable time to address properly. However, there is one decision that I can make immediately. Maya felt her stomach tighten. This was the moment that would determine whether their bold gamble had paid off or whether they'd just talked themselves out of any chance of completing their galactic education. Effective immediately, Dean Korthak continued, your proposed transfer to Centauri Institute is rescinded. You will continue your studies here at the Academy with full access to advanced research opportunities and faculty collaboration. Maya felt relief flood through her, but the dean wasn't finished. Furthermore, he said, I am authorizing the expansion of the Human Exchange Program from 12 students to 50, with accommodations for the specialized cognitive and biological needs that your species brings to our academic community. The auditorium erupted in surprised chatter. Maya and Tom exchanged amazed looks. They hadn't just earned the right to stay, they'd opened the door for dozens of other human students to follow in their footsteps. However, Dean Korthak said, raising his voice above the crowd, these opportunities come with corresponding responsibilities. You will serve as liaisons between human and galactic approaches to education. You will help develop new evaluation protocols that recognize diverse forms of intelligence. And you will prove, through your continued academic achievements, that the Academy's investment in cognitive diversity is worthwhile. Maya stepped forward. We understand, Dean Korthak, and we accept those responsibilities gladly. As the symposium concluded and the audience began dispersing, Maya found herself surrounded by faculty members and fellow students eager to discuss the implications of her presentation. For the first time since arriving at Kepler Station, she felt truly welcomed rather than merely tolerated. Tom joined her as they made their way out of the auditorium, both of them still processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. So, Tom said, think we can handle being poster children for human cognitive diversity? Maya laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. I think we're about to find out, though at least we won't be doing it alone anymore. She looked down at Max, who had been remarkably patient throughout the long presentation. Want to go celebrate, little guy? I think you've earned some exploration time. As they walked through the corridors of Kepler Station, Maya noticed that other students were no longer avoiding her. Some nodded respectfully as she passed, others stopped to ask questions about human approaches to various problems, and more than a few seemed genuinely curious about the small ferret who had become an unlikely symbol of interspecies cooperation. The Academy was changing, Maya realized, not just in its policies or procedures, but in its fundamental understanding of what intelligence could look like. The humans were no longer outsiders trying to prove their worth. They were partners bringing unique value to a collaborative enterprise. And this, Maya thought as she watched the gas giant's storms through a corridor viewport, was only the beginning. 6 months had passed since Maya and Tom's presentation to the Academy Research Symposium, and Kepler Station had transformed in ways that none of its inhabitants could have anticipated. The arrival of the expanded Human Exchange Program had brought 50 brilliant minds from Earth, each carrying their own unique perspectives and approaches to galactic challenges. Maya stood in the newly constructed Human Studies Center, a facility that had been built to accommodate both human physiological needs and the various companion animals that many students had brought from Earth. The center buzzed with activity as students worked on collaborative projects that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. In one corner, Dr. Jessica Martinez was working with a team of Vorthan crystallographers to develop new materials using a combination of human intuitive chemistry and Vorthan harmonic resonance techniques. Nearby, Professor Chen Wei was teaching a mixed species class on adaptive problem solving, using case studies from Earth's history to demonstrate how crisis situations could accelerate innovation. But it was the ongoing projects that truly demonstrated how far they'd all come. Maya watched as Sarah Thompson, a marine biologist from the University of Sydney, guided a group of Zilithian and Nebulant students through an analysis of Terran ecosystem dynamics. Sarah's companion, a border collie named Einstein, demonstrated herding behaviors that the non-human students found endlessly fascinating. The key insight, Sarah was explaining, is that Earth's ecosystems evolved under constant pressure from catastrophic events. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, massive die-offs every few million years. This created evolutionary pressures that favored adaptability over specialization. A young Zilithian student raised her clawed hand. Professor Thompson, how does this apply to our current research on galactic ecosystem management? Excellent question, Kethara, Sarah replied. Maya recognized the student as the same one who had been terrified by Tom's escaped ferret months earlier. Now she was one of Sarah's most enthusiastic students. Traditional galactic approaches assume stable environmental conditions and focus on optimization within established parameters. But what happens when those parameters change dramatically? Einstein chose that moment to demonstrate, alerting the group to a maintenance drone that had entered the classroom through an open ventilation grate. Instead of panicking or calling security, the students watched with fascination as the border collie assessed the situation, determined that the drone posed no threat, and returned to his position beside Sarah's desk. "That's adaptive intelligence in action," Sarah said. Einstein evaluated a novel situation using principles he learned in completely different contexts, made a rapid decision based on incomplete information, and adjusted his response based on real-time assessment of outcomes. On the other side of the center, Maya could see Tom Jenkins working with a team that included some of the Academy's most distinguished theoretical physicists. Their collaboration had produced 3 groundbreaking papers on quantum consciousness theory, and rumors suggested they were close to a breakthrough that could revolutionize faster-than-light communication. But Maya's attention was drawn to a commotion near the center's main entrance. A group of Academy administrators was entering, led by Dean Kortak and followed by several individuals that Maya didn't recognize. Their formal bearing and elaborate ceremonial dress suggested they were important visitors from the Galactic Confederation's central government. "Attention, students and faculty," Dean Kortak announced, his voice carrying easily through the bustling center. "I have the honor of introducing Ambassador Velnara of the Confederation Science Council, along with representatives from the Ministry of Educational Standards and the Department of Interspecies Affairs." High-level government visits usually meant policy reviews, and policy reviews could go either way. She made her way toward the front of the center, noting that other human students were doing the same. Ambassador Velnara was an impressive figure even by Vorthan standards, her crystalline form showing the deep purple coloration that indicated both advanced age and high political rank. When she spoke, her harmonic voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to shaping galactic policy. "Dean Korthak, faculty members, and students," she began, "I have come here today to conduct a formal evaluation of the Human Integration Program and its impact on Academy operations." Maya exchanged glances with Tom, who had joined the gathering crowd. Formal evaluations could be routine affairs, but the presence of multiple government departments suggested this was anything but routine. Over the past 6 months, Ambassador Velnara continued, reports from this academy have challenged certain assumptions about optimal educational practices within the Confederation. These reports have prompted significant debate within the Science Council about the advisability of continued expansion of non-traditional educational approaches. Maya could see faculty members and students from various species looking nervous, while the human students appeared to be bracing themselves for another fight to prove their worth. "However," the ambassador said, and Maya caught a subtle shift in her harmonic tone, "recent events have provided additional context for our evaluation. Several systems were marked in red, indicating some kind of crisis or emergency situation. 3 weeks ago," Ambassador Velnara explained, "the colony world of Kepler, 4.2b, experienced a catastrophic failure of its atmospheric processing systems. The planet's 30 million inhabitants faced extinction within days unless a solution could be found." She knew where this was going, and it wasn't going to end well for the human program. Traditional Confederation emergency response protocols call for immediate evacuation followed by system reconstruction using established technological solutions. Evacuation alone would have taken months and likely resulted in significant casualties. The star chart zoomed in to show Kepler 442b, a blue-green world that looked heartbreakingly similar to Earth. Maya could see why colonists had chosen it and why 30 million beings called it home. The response team assigned to this crisis included several recent Academy graduates, including 2 human students who had completed accelerated degrees through your expanded program. Maya's heart stopped. She looked at Tom, who was staring at the display with an expression of growing amazement. "Doctor." Michael Santos and Dr. Lisa Chang, both recent graduates of this Academy's Human Studies program, were part of the emergency response team. When traditional approaches failed to provide viable solutions within the required time frame, they proposed an alternative approach. The display changed to show technical schematics that Maya recognized as atmospheric processing designs, but with modifications she'd never seen before. Dr. Santos, drawing on human expertise in crisis adaptation, suggested using biological atmospheric processors based on genetically modified Earth bacteria rather than traditional technological systems. Dr. Chang, utilizing human pattern recognition capabilities. The student from the Deathworld was dismissed, then her pet prevented any escape. HFY Stories.